Alright students, welcome back to our lesson, and in this video we're going to be talking about quality control. Now what does that mean? Well, now that we have all this fantastic work done, we need to go through our work and make sure that we have all of our technical challenges met. So we need to make sure that our grain matches, that we do not have any negative pixels. We don't have any positive, like super blown out pixels, as well as just checking all of our edge work, making sure we retain as much information as possible, that we didn't affect any of the plate that shouldn't have been affected, like her face and things of that nature, and just really just quality, check every single aspect of this image. So to do that, of course, we're going to be going to our quality control QC check. And we already went through some of this already, but we're going to dive a little bit deeper into it. We already covered it pretty intensely, but we're going to start taking a look at what all this means. Now, one of the things I found, in particularly for this assignment, that we're going to have to kind of check a different part of the plate for some of these values, because like this one, as you can see, we have a lot of the plate that we've changed. Anything that's red is something that we've changed, and you can see that we have stuff on our face and stuff up in here. Now this is coming from the motion blur and from the different camera effects that we did in the previous video. So what I want to do is I actually want to take my final comp section here. This is for the QC check, and we're going to move it all the way up to right up here. And the reason why we're doing that, this is before we have all of our camera moves and all of that stuff. And this is going to allow us to take a look and see if we are affecting anything that shouldn't be affected on her skin. So this is how I typically go through when I'm quality checking my own work. I'm going to, if I'm adding any type of camera shake or any additional movement to the plate, I'm going to do my QC above that and then move it back down to then check out the grain and all that stuff that we need to match. So this is the first step that I like to do. So let's go ahead and analyze what we have here. Of course, the backgrounds changed quite drastically because we, took out all the screens and put in our CG elements. And then we can see we're mostly not affecting her. Now we are affecting certain areas in here, and this is all despill areas that we are affecting in here. So I'm not too worried about that. Notice our skin tones are good, we're not affecting her skin tones at all, which is very important. Even though we did a despill, we did a controlled despill that was not removing the luminance values of her skin tones, and that's very important. So that's why we do our check. Now she might have like a tiny little bit of spots up in here, and that's because the green screen was reflecting onto her face up here because we were spraying her with water, so she was a little bit more reflective. So you will see small little spots like that, but you shouldn't see anything that's like this or like this. Now this is just our dust element that's going over top of the plate, so you can really see. And typically, when you're doing this check, you're going to have it already cached out, and you're going to watch it, and you can do it. Now, what I want you guys to do is we're going to actually do a contact sheet of all of our QC steps here towards the end of the video, and so we're going to start prepping that ahead of time. So let's go ahead and do a contact sheet here. And you don't normally do this for any type of, like when you're out in the industry, you're not going to do like a contact sheet of this. This is primarily just so you guys can kind of see everything that's going on within the step. So right here we go. Now this is our black level check. We're going to take a look here and see how our black levels are working across the board. Now this is one of those that you're going to want to go ahead and move your viewer down to the bottom back to where it was. because we need to check our black values within motion blur of the frames, as well as with all of the dust going across and all that. So we're going to spot check it, 1058. We can see where we have our vignette going across and all, and she is feeling a little lifted compared to this guy over here. However, she does have dust blowing in front of her. So what we need to do is not look at that, but look at her hair details and her, the darkness of her eyes, as well as her eyebrows and some of these shadowed areas to get a more accurate representation. Because even this guy looks a little darker than these two. Well, this guy doesn't have as much dust blowing in front of him at that frame. But as we pick other frames, you'll see that he will get lifted a little bit more than what's going around. You can really see how the dust is affecting our values here. And of course, you would want to go through and check each of our red, green, and blue channels. And looks like my computer is freaking out a little bit. All right, I think I have to stick to. Oh, there we go. It's starting to come back. This is the motion blur samples that are taking a little bit longer to do, to build a frame. All right, I'm going to hit pause. Oh, there it goes. All right, so we got our blue channel here. As you can see, we're seeing the good values. And so everything is looking pretty balanced. I would say, if anything, this guy here might need to be lifted up just a little bit, because he is competing against our hero. So he looks like he's just slightly lifted, or slightly crushed down too much, and needs to be a little lifted. That's the only area I'm seeing that really stands out. Like once I see things, like if I cache this out and see it in motion, I might change my mind about that. So that's kind of like what we're looking for. Now, what we're going to do is check our high values as well. Now, checking our high values, what's good about this is we want to see what is the brightest thing in frame. And is it the sky? Do we have the sun in the frame? Do we have, is it a flashlight that's in there that we're adding? When you do muzzle flashes and stuff like that, you want the exposure and the intensity of each of those elements to be correct. And one of the things I like to do is whenever I'm comping, I do what's called gamma slamming. And what I do is I'll take a look at the final image. I'm going to do this without my OCIO node on. And what I do is I'll take this and I'll start racking it down, and I'm going to start looking to see what is taking the longest to move to 0, and that's going to be what's brightest in the frame. Now, if I have a hot spot up in the sky, and her scarf is still brighter than what that hot spot in the sky is, then that would be wrong. So you just look for the balance. Now this one's actually balanced pretty well. I'm expecting this to be the brightest part because we have a bunch of different effects going over top of one another. They're mixing in, and I actually brought those levels up like they're reflecting the light that's around, even though we're in that dust storm. So I'm expecting that to be the brightest spot in our plate. So, and it is. She is disappearing with the background pretty nicely. I'm looking to see how she disappears with like values in the background, and sure enough, she is disappearing just nicely. So that's how I typically do my checks for the white levels. Now, as we go in here, we can see all of our different channels, and it's always important to look at each of the channels and take a look. You can go ahead and you can crank this up just to kind of see how those are looking, as well as do the opposite where we can make them disappear and see how they are, like what's appearing first. And you can kind of see that the blue channel, it's almost equal. This is still there a little bit more than what this is, and I'm not sure if you can even see that on your screens, but it is there. So that's how we're going to be checking our high values. So I'm going to go ahead and connect that to our contact sheet. So as we do these, we're just going to connect these and check the saturation levels. Now we're going to go ahead and click on that, and we can see here that we have some pretty high saturation levels in here. This is not too bad. Like, it's balanced to her, which is really good. I would say, if anything, this is probably a little undersaturated up in this area, up in here. But that's okay, because excuse me. That's okay, because the sky has a bunch of dust going through, and we're actually kind of knocking that back with that dust. So that's to be expected. Now, one thing that's really good to check with your saturation levels is you know, the reason why we do this is we're checking our CG, making sure our CG is matching anything that's a true plate or live action. And when you're doing some heavy visual effect shots, like very like I'm talking like Fantastic Four, how we did that whole big plasma ball type effect, if you remember all the way back when I showed you my reel. We had to check the saturation levels constantly on that as we were making our adjustments, because if we went too overly saturated, it's going to look very super CG and fake. You really want to pull those values down just enough to give it some color, but it looks more realistic and sits into plate a little bit better. So that's why we do that. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to check, see if we have any negative values or super high values. And it's going to show up as like a little red dot in here if we do. And it looks like we don't. It looks like we are good. This should be a black. Now we got some very, very small little guys up in here. Let's see what they read. And it's actually reading 1. So we're actually still within the safe range there. And what I'm doing is I'm looking down here. Okay. And this is in the blue channel that we're seeing this in. So I'm actually okay with that, seeing that. Now if those were like super blown out or negative value, yeah, these are all clamping at 1. So I'm actually okay with that. That's me pulling this way up too. So we should be all right there. Let me see what that is when I pull it down. Yeah, it's still a 1 value. So if it was like a super high value, it'd be like, 15, 20, let me see. So if it was like a negative value, you would be getting like literally it would say -1 or -2. That means it would be a black hole in your frame. So it's super important to have that information as well. The reason why that's important is, one, you will get like literally a black dot that shows up on your frame, and that black dot can cause a couple different errors. One, it could cause your render not to render that one frame. It might freak out the engine, and it will put a big line going across your frame, or it might do some other weirdness. In fact, I had that on one of the shows I was working on. We got CG back, and the CG literally had negative values in that we actually had to go in and fix. And the terrible part was it was on one element, and it would just show up periodically throughout the play. It wasn't like a constant. So we had to go in with it was called a nan killer, and it would go in and look for nans, and then it would take the pixel values around that nan and suck it in and colorize that negative pixel to get corrected. So there are ways to fix it. So if we have any nans in here, this is the one that's going to turn red for us. So if we have any negative values that are red on our plate, this is going to show up. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to check this, out. I'm literally just going across the image. And I'm trying to be a little bit more systematic, because you really want to be able to see if you have any of those. And I'm really going to check her face closely. And we are good. No nans. That's great. So we've made it through this entire process without seeing any negative values. And so we are, so far, doing pretty good on our quality checks. Now the grain check. Let's go ahead and see what's going on here. So how this works is we're going to do a difference, just like a keyer, and we're going to start keying out what is different. So we have the comp, and then we have the plate, and then those are going to get key mixed over top, and we'll exposure up so we can kind of see what's going on. And then we're going to see here with the red channel how that is looking with one another. And we got black and black and white values that we can check against, and we should see anything that is not mixing correctly. So what it's saying here is, like, if we're seeing this checkerboard, we may need to tweak the grain values. Well, being what we did our grain values with the plate, it's probably not going to show up on this particular plate the way we're seeing it, because the amount of work that we did on this plate and the amount of grain that we're adding back on, we can check our values. I can tell you we're very, very, very close on value-wise here. So the way I like to check to make sure that my values are good is I'm going to go up here, and I'm going to say number 1 up here. And now this is going to our grain, our denoise plate, and we're looking at our grain. So we're adding grain back onto this plate, and then we're going to look at the original plate, which is right here. And then we're going to compare our channels. So we're going to hit W, and let's go to red. And as you can see here, we're pretty darn close. Look at our green channel and blue channel, and we're looking pretty good. Now, what we can do is we can take a look and see what we can do here, and maybe we can tweak this to be even closer. Let's give it a shot here. So because we have a global control here for our grain, we can go up here, and we're going to start messing around and seeing what we can get, see if we can make this checkerboard disappear. And first thing we'll try is the amount, and it's becoming more apparent. So it's not the amount that's causing the issue. Maybe it's the size. No, it's not the size either. No, you should look at the red channel for that adjustment. Alright, so we can try making that checkerboard go. See if we pull it in, we're seeing a lot of it. So because of the way we affected this plate, I don't think we're going to get like a perfect, or match, because this part of the green screen is original, this part is not, because we modified that heavily. We're seeing it disappear on her face a little more. There we go. That's looking better. So that's what I'm going to be my most concerned about is going to be what's on her face. So then we'll go up here and let's go to our next channel. And we'll go to our last channel, blue. There we go. All right, and what we're going to do is check our low values. We'll take a look at those areas down there. Try our mids. That's better. The highs are going to be pretty impossible to match the way our play, because we didn't have highs to compare against, so we're fine there. So we were able to tweak that a little bit. Now, one of the things I want to do is let's take a look, because I'm just purely curious at this point. Let's take a look up here and let's compare this to this and see how our grain is looking, and I'll explain the difference here. And you know what? It actually does look a little bit better on the red channel. Green channel I'm a little iffy on. It's not bad though. Blue channel definitely looks pretty darn good as well. Let's take a look in the low areas here. Yep. I would say if anything, feels like there might be a little too much in the low area on the red channel. Oh, actually not enough. That was the wrong direction. Yeah, it feels better for the blue. Okay. So there we go. So I did a little bit better for the low. So you can see how that's a pretty powerful tool. And that definitely, like when you're dealing with something that is just like, let's say it's like the same plate being comped over something. Maybe you're mixing two plates together, like it's a split screen, and you had to denoise the plates and then regrain for patch it work or whatever, like paint work or something along those lines. That's going to be a great tool to see if you're matching that grain perfectly. So that's a wonderful tool to have, and I hope you guys always take that with you and use it for every single project that you're working on if you are adding grain to it. Now, here is the list of stuff that you always must do, especially if you're doing any type of green screen work, any type of roto, pretty much anything that you're adding onto a plate. You need to check your edges, and you need to check your format. You need to check your bounding boxes. All that stuff is very, very important. Alright, so now that you have all that done, we also want to take a look at our plate. So what we're going to do here, and I kind of set this up ahead of time for all you guys. We did this in the video about doing the channel here. And what we're going to do here is we're going to compare these two plates. And the reason why we're doing these two is because we're going to do it without any of the camera motions and all that stuff, because then everything will line up. If we did it the other way, then nothing would line up. So we're going to have, let's actually do our plate as 1, or our comp as 1, and our green screen as 2. We're going to hit W, and now we can slide between the two. So this is where we're going to get all nice and close and personal on our plate here, and we're going to take a look, and we're going to see how each of these edges are working. As you can see here, we are bringing back a lot of information. We have some pretty good edge working. Our fall off is matching fairly decently. You know, we are a little shy here, but not too terribly. And I expect a little bit of that to be not, you know, it's not going to be ideally perfect, but it's going to be pretty darn close. And the areas that we really want to take a look at are these like little point areas. All right, so now that we're looking over each of these edges, we're going to look at all the problem areas. Like I was saying before, these areas down in here, you always want to take a look to see if we have any webbing issues. The webbing is when it rounds off a point like this. And, you know, when we were doing our keys, we spent close attention to details, getting each of those areas to work out pretty well. So I wish I could get this guy a little bit stronger in there, but, you know, overall, it's pretty darn good. We are keeping a lot of that detail. So I'm okay with that. This gets a little bit rounded here. We're not getting as much detail. That's an area that I would probably go back and try to work that a little bit better. Especially if this was going out for final, I would definitely want to go back and revisit that. Here you can see we're getting a lot of this beautiful hair detail in there. So I'm pretty happy with that. We're getting lots of little strands and all, and that's really, really good. I'm really happy about that. Here we go. We're going through. We're taking a look to see where our paint it was and seeing how that looks, and we are doing really, really well with this hair. This hair is looking really good, really solid. And if you're not seeing the exact same thing that I have on my side, go ahead and tweak your values a little bit. We should be pretty close to the same type of look and feel for our hair. We still don't have quite as many strands as I would like to get over here. We're getting them, but they're very, very, very faint, and we're not quite getting these. Again, we would probably go in and actually adjust these a little bit. Sometimes people even go in and paint those flyaways in. I don't like to do that as much because I like to do procedural stuff with the plate, but sometimes you have to brute force it. But overall, I'm pretty happy with that. Going down here, this section looks really good. I'm looking at this between the arms section here. We're getting a good amount of that detail back. There's a little bit of harshness to it. It's not quite as soft as I would like, so maybe a tweak of maybe an edge blur in here would help, but we would have to kind of do a holdout roto for that edge blur, because we wouldn't want to do that on the material, because the material already is losing some of its strength in there, like right in here. I wish I could get a little bit more in there, and I still might be able to. Here we go. This is a good example of a little bit of webbing. Now this still would probably be okay, because there is some detail that's in there that is causing that. It's just not quite as strong as I would like it to be as of an angle. But as I look at it, you can see it. So yeah, so we're getting there. All right, so so now I'm looking at I'm still looking at this this corner here. We can see that those pixel values are there. And with our despill, that's why we're seeing that a little bit more. So I'm actually okay with that. It's a good analysis and it's fun. Now this is an area that we didn't go back to do, like I was thinking about doing it, then I didn't, and now I'm thinking that we would need to go back and do that. As we can see here, the flap just gets a little too crisp, a little bit too sharp in there. You can see here how it's a little bit less. So we would have some additional work to do on this section. Right here, I'm pretty happy with that, how that looks. And they're not too bad. By the way, like stuff like this where you have the like little loops and stuff like that, that always causes issues. So having like good results like we're getting here is pretty good. Now, I'm looking at one frame here. This is not something you do one frame at a time. So this area down here might be a little, we might not be going to a sharp enough point. We're eating away a little bit too much of her leg there. So we might actually have to go in and make an adjustment on that guy too. Kind of like shrink that in with an erode to make that work a little bit better. I mean, overall it's not terrible. It would be passable because we're not eating away so much that it looks wrong. It actually looks okay. So that's going to be more of a personal note about if I have time. It's called a CBB note. It's something that I will go and correct if I have time left in the production, basically. And so now that we did our edge checks, and again, you would do that over multiple frames. I'm only doing one frame here because of how long it's taken to load, but you would do it as as it plays. You would be doing that so you can see how things are interacting with the wind and how it's blowing through. All of those values. In fact, actually, because we're looking at our one plate, we can actually do that. We can actually, it's probably going to take a little bit longer to process like this. Let me do it this way and see if I can get one plate to, yeah, it doesn't like to cache this with the Camtasia open. All right, so now one of the last things you do is you want to check your editorial lineup. Is it starting at 1001 to 1101? Are your render settings or global settings are correct? What's your format settings? Are you adding any extra pixels up here? The other last thing I always like to check is I'll do what is called a view metadata down at the bottom, because we have our metadata coming in here. I'm going to view this and we're going to see if we're getting metadata in here, and we are. That's important to check because some shows rely on that metadata to drop into their edit bays. So like a couple of the DI places will have custom tools that write different metadata tags in each of the plates as they get processed out for visual effects. And what they ask us to do is to bring back that metadata back in so that when they read it back into their system's going to look for that metadata and it's going to place it perfectly in the same position where it needs to be without them having to do any work. All they do is they just say, here's that folder, import in, and then it just goes and it drops everything in perfect location and everything is synced up, all the color is applied, and they can get to work really quick. So it's super important to keep that metadata through your entire system, through your entire path. That's why we branched it off and brought it down separately and brought it back into our comp. Now, whenever you're working with green screen, there's going to typically always be a request for mats. Now, mats are somewhat, some people like them a certain way. Certain studios will have you do a certain thing. Basically, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be looking down your chain here, and you're going to have a copy here. And you can say add mats in here, and you're just going to go up and you're going to connect that to where the mat is. Now, sometimes you have to go in and make some adjustments to the mats for DI. So if we had any type of gray values out here, we would need to usually put a grade node in there and kind of grade down those values and try to keep as much of the detail of our edges as possible, because what they'll do is they'll go and they'll blur out our mats a little bit and do power windows and things of that nature with them for color correction. So this right here, if we go to 1058, we're going to see that we're not quite getting all of her hair in there because of the way we did our comp, how we had our hair system over here, where we're bringing in the multiply divide, and we're doing this guy down here, or over here, I should say. So what we can do is we can see if we can add onto our mat channel that information specifically for the hair, so we can get a little bit better result. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to connect that to that hair one, and I'm just going to bring that dot all the way down to here, and we're going to merge that over top, and we're going to see what we get. So obviously we got some work that we need to do to make this work correctly, because obviously we can't turn this in here. So if you remember, we did a little bit of a process here where we cropped off our core mat, or used our core mat to kind of bring things together and kind of block things off. So what we're going to do is we're going to use it over here and see how that works for us. And okay, so it sort of worked. It still has issues. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try applying this as a mask in here. And what we need to do, though, is we might need to do it without the invert. Yeah, that's not helping us too great. All right, so let's see here. That, do a grade. Oh, I see. I see what's going on. All right. Let's see here. I'm going to pull from this side instead. That's what I should have done. Okay, so now let's see, do this again. I might have to do an inside actually. Maybe get rid of that. Let's see here. You know what? Since we only want this hair up here, we have a different map for that. I totally forgot. I believe it's this one. Yep. There we go. Now we're talking. So what we can do here, let's get rid of that. And let's get rid of that and that. And we'll plug it in to here. There we go. That's the special sauce right there. So now we have a little bit of something showing up there. So now we can take our grade node. We'll go RGB, we'll just go to alpha, since we only needed to affect the alpha. And we'll start pulling that down. Now we are going to affect the hair ever so slightly. So I'm going to pull that value up a little bit, and then pull down our black value, then pull up or down our whites value, maybe pull the gamma up just a hair, and that's a happy compromise. So if I hit D here, that's what we would have turned in before. Now that might have not worked so well for us, so we want to get as much detail back into the plate as possible. So then that's what we're doing here. Now it might be a little too chunky actually. Let's go ahead and back that off just a little bit. There we go. All right, so to recap on what I did there, because I did a lot of like little guesswork here, trying to move things around, try to get things to look a little bit better. And what I ended up doing was just taking a rotonode, and we're taking our hair key that we did, and we're merging that right over top of our base key. So we have this key here, we have this key here, that's the hair. We do a slight grade to it just to kind of help a couple of the areas. In fact, I want to actually pull that down a little bit. I saw it change. Or is that? Yep, there we go. That's the change I wanted to do. It's putting that to 1. I'll just take the black value up. There we go. That looks better. All right, so that's going to give us a better alpha matte. Now, if we take a look at our plate, this is called an unpremultiplied alpha in our EXR. So we can embed that into the EXR. Some studios like that, some studios don't. Some studios want a separate EXR that just has the alpha. And sometimes maybe you'll include like the matte painting rocks will be their own alpha. Then you'll have her as an alpha, so that she might be the red channel, this might be the green channel, and then the matte painting backdrop might be the blue channel. So there's a couple different ways of going about doing different mattes. Now that we have all that done, let's go ahead and talk about the turn-in process in our next video.